So today I'm actually going to give a talk about pharma trends in healthcare, specifically on biotech scaling challenges that are actually impacting the opportunity, our ability for drugs to actually get to market. My name is Seyi Fasoranti. Overall, I'm going to talk a bit about myself, because I love talking about myself. But in terms of my background, I've always loved being a scientist. I've always, as a kid, I used to actually go into the house and actually take apart my parents' electronics and blame it on my younger brother. But I always enjoyed actually just taking things apart and really learning about how they work. And so I did my undergrad at Georgetown University in biochemistry and math, did a master's in chemical engineering, and then did a PhD in chemistry and material science, where I did fusion energy research. I did that for a while. I've been in school perpetually for a really long time. Then decided to actually go ahead and do work as an engineer at Intel Corporation. After that experience, moved into finance, worked at Morgan Stanley in fixed income, and then came to Booth to actually learn more business. And I also just because I couldn't just stop going to school. But so that's me in a nutshell. I really enjoy many topics, and I've always been deeply curious about how the world works. But I think for me specifically, what actually speaks strongly to me are two topics. One's biotech, and the second one is climate. Currently, I actually work at the Power Ventures, which is a climate tech-focused fund that's actually focused on hardware, AI, and software. So that's me briefly. And why I'm actually speaking about this topic specifically is because, one, I actually started as a theoretical biophysicist. I worked a lot in biotech-related fields, and I kind of saw the funding gaps that were actually impacting the industry. Also, I worked as an engineer at Intel. I was broadly focused on manufacturing, and as a result of that, I could intimately see how important it was to essentially invest or actually place capital into various underserved parts of any sector, because that's very important for actually making it grow. So why does this matter itself? The first one is that we actually have there's a growth in the aging population, even though we're previously in a time where we've actually been in a situation where there was a growth in small molecules, but then there's actually a transition to actually biologics and more complex molecules. But because of those new type of therapies, that's actually grown in tandem with an aging population. There's a huge demand for healthcare. Also a huge demand for very innovative therapies that can treat things like rare diseases, as well as transition from just treatment-based solutions, but to actually curative solutions in general. And as you see on the graph, by 2060, the aging population, the people over 65 plus will be 94.7 million overall. In addition to actually just biotech applications to healthcare, there's also, why this is really important is also the fact that as the population grows, you also need to feed them. And one of the ways to actually resolve this is specifically making more efficient ways to grow food. And that's driven by essentially new biotechnology solutions overall. So things that will actually make more efficient cells that can actually help grow, genetic engineering that can help grow different type of crops and agricultural products overall. So I talked a bit earlier about increased complexity of drugs and molecules, but historically we've actually been in a phase where a lot of the first drugs were actually small molecules, the classical antibiotics, which transitioned to actually more innovative drugs over time. So take your classical aspirin, for example. It's 21 atoms overall. And a better analogy for that would be, say, your bike. I don't know if any of you are bikers. I'm a big biker. So take an aspirin, use a bike as an analogy. And now you actually move to the right. You have an antibody-type technology. And that's essentially 25,000 atoms. Very complex molecule, very difficult, not just to actually make in the lab, but also very difficult to actually make at a large scale. And that's similar when you actually go from a bike to a plane itself. So there's a lot of things that actually have to come together when you're essentially building a large complex molecule to actually create a therapy. You have to think carefully about how do you manufacture this at scale, just not going from lab, but also actually to provide that to a large number of people. Who are also the second thing is thinking about how do you get this to the end user or to the patient itself. And so healthcare delivery of these drugs is not just a simple case of taking it from point A to point B, but some of these therapies actually need very complex logistic chains. Say, for example, just to provide some context, there is a new type of therapy, it's called an antibody drug conjugate that's heavily used for actually targeted treatment of different types of solid and liquid tumors. That needs to be actually cooled down to very low temperatures, and that as a result of that, you need cold chain logistics to move it to the patient itself. But that needs essentially new infrastructure, new types of systems that would allow that be possible. And so a lot of things have to come into place, and the ecosystem has to actually come together. So I talked a bit about what the scaling challenges were. Earlier I mentioned supply chain, but also key things will be also quality. It's much easier to actually make very small molecules in a very large number of small molecules in very well-defined, because they are very well-defined structures. But for like a very complex molecule, it's actually very difficult to reproduce these very complex molecules over a period of time with very little defects or impurities. And that's very challenging for the manufacturing process. There are also questions like continuous manufacturing. A big thing is it's easy to actually make a small molecule using continuous manufacturing, using batch and continuous manufacturing. But for biologic or for antibody or an RNA or for cell and gene therapy, you would have to actually create systems where you are able to actually make products that you can actually make at a cheaper cost, as well as over a longer period of time. So a lot of VC funding in the biologics complex molecule space has really been lacking a lot, primarily because it's very low returns type environment. And one thing is there are very specialized VCs that really focus on this. And however, there's still a need for funding, especially in terms of actually late stage funding overall, as well as early stage funding. At the middle for phase 2 clinical trial assets, there is a lot of funding coming either from strategic investors or early stage investors who are very specialized in the space. Immunology has actually played a big role in actually people have been interested in that space overall. And there are just multiple types of modalities being explored over time. Broadly, you've heard of cell and gene therapy. That's going to be revolutionary for a lot of, for actually providing curative type therapies. You obviously are probably heard of antibody type therapeutics, as well as RNA type therapeutics. But there's a lot of different allocations to different modalities overall. What I want you guys to take from this overall is essentially the fact that there's a lot of actually funding, if you actually look at the right, for phase 3 assets, but that actually tails off when you go to early stage investments. And a lot of the funding gap is all early stage overall, and that's actually very pivotal for innovation. Most of the best ideas actually come from early stage founders, and so it's definitely very important, especially in the Chicago area. There are very few biotech investors are actually able to help bridge people from the early stage phase 1 to phase 3. And that plays a very big role in our healthcare, in everyone's healthcare, in our parents' healthcare, and also in our future healthcare. I just wanted to talk briefly about a few people actually, companies that I've actually looked into, talked to over a period of time, and what they're doing to actually scale up the drug making process overall. So I was going to talk about Solaris. They've actually have an integrated development manufacturing organization. So essentially like a box system where it makes it more efficient to essentially develop drugs over time. You have Ganymede. They actually created integrated software to actually connect different systems together to allow essentially different instruments in labs as well as in the manufacturing setting to easily transmit data, as well as make it easier to actually automate different types of data. Then you have multi-labs. They are doing something really interesting and innovative overall, in terms of actually using robots to essentially help speed up the manufacturing process. Landing AI is also exceptionally great. They're actually using computer vision models to essentially build in manufacturing inspection as well as quality control. So lots of innovation in the space. We just need the funding for that. and would love to continue this conversation overall about why this is important. But thanks for actually hearing my talk overall. If you'd like to actually connect with me, there's my barcode, and I'm happy to continue the conversation. Thank you.